Noelle, thank you so much for joining me on the show. I'm excited to dive in today.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Now, I know I was like, quick, before we start getting into any more juice, I need to press the record button. But I'm talking to you today, and I'm really excited because this topic that we're going to dive into, and I'm sure there's going to be many, but specifically around, technology, isolation, belonging, has been coming up for me in a lot of different ways, but also in so many people that I've been talking to and working with, and especially women, because I've been diving into women's work with, working on them really releasing their feminine essence. And a lot of this feeling of not belonging, or that, am I here alone? Am I doing this alone, is coming up for a lot of people. So I'm curious to chat about this with you.
Oh, yeah. And thank you for doing that work. It is near and dear to my heart as a feminist coach and coach trainer to be empowering women to live in feminine essence, especially as leaders. And yes, let's release it. So awesome. I'm happy to help. I'm happy to shed light. Where should we begin?
Well, that's an interesting place to begin, because I've even had my struggles with being a leader, or somebody who is wanting to be, boss woman, say, but has felt like I needed to do it from this very masculine, assertive, blinkered place. And I've been on this crazy, messy, awkward, emotional, vulnerable journey to release the vulnerable essence in me, or the feminine essence in me, and still feel powerful in that. And I think what I've seen as a pattern is that women want to do good things, want to be like, independent, and want to be able to be strong, but feel like that feminine place is perhaps weak, or perhaps like less than. And so that's where I've gotten deeply passionate about the work, because it's so not about that at all. And there's so much power in the feminine essence. So let's start there with your work in, helping women, empowered women, be leaders, but come from the feminine essence. And what does that even mean?
Oh, yeah. And this is something that I've been, wrestling with in real time. I'm an accidental CEO. This was not my plan. This isn't what I thought I'd be doing with my life. I accidentally built my coach training company while I was in graduate school. And if somebody didn't take the reins, it was going to die. And so I literally uprooted my life, left my husband, who I married 2 months prior, moved to Los Angeles by myself, and kind of was thrown to the wolves in the world of business with no business background whatsoever. I was training to be a sexologist. So what I experienced is that for me, stepping into masculine energy and masculine ways of leading and running a team doesn't work. And that for me, what did work and what has really been powerful as a coach has been to look at matriarchal tribal systems and try to understand, what makes a female leader effective. And it's come down to trust. And it's come down to consistent good decision making, kindness, humanity, love, flow, centering well-being, centering the well-being of my team, centering the well-being of my coaches, and standing in that and saying, yeah, I am different. And I hear that all the time. Everybody always tells me, especially in business forums, no one thinks like you, no one acts like you. And that's my strength. And that's where the strength is for the feminine, is to stand in that difference and do things differently.
I've got shivers as you said those traits, how you show up, because that's something that draws me in fully. Like, that's something how I want to show up as well, And I think I've made so many what seems to be illogical decisions because because I couldn't do it out of integrity, right? I was like, that feels like it's out of my integrity to do it that way, or to say that thing, or to believe that thing. And I think part of me has felt, if I speak from my own experience, part of me has felt like that wasn't okay, or like the coming from the more feminine essence was going to be stomped all over. Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, I relate 100%. And the framework that I can lend to your experience is the concept of the colonized mind. Have you ever heard of that, or are you familiar with it at all? Okay, so let's pull back a little bit and talk about what colonization is. It's one culture that has taken over another culture and has said, you know, our way or the highway, you must conform to this way of being. And if you step outside of the lines and the norms, you're doing it wrong, you're in trouble, you will get beat down. That's what we've seen throughout history with different levels of colonization. Women are a colonized minority in a male-focused patriarchal world. Period. End of story. I will back that statement up 1,000%. So when we're understanding the female psyche in terms of the colonized mind, we've been socialized as women since we were young girls that we inhabit our bodies, but our bodies are also for public consumption. And it is the aspect of our femaleness that makes us a secondary citizen in the world. And so our bodies are for public consumption. We're continually being assessed as to whether or not we're pleasing people. Objectification theory is breaking apart women's bodies into like, oh, you know, nice breasts or nice legs or nice arms or whatever. So you're not actually a whole person, you're deconstructed. Mm-hmm. And so when we experience that disassociation of saying, okay, this doesn't feel right to me, but there is this really ugly pressure to conform to a different way of being, that's the colonized mind. That's wrenching against the old systems and the old structures that haven't made space or created ways for women to show up as themselves in society.
Whoa. Mm-hmm. And what was your process of moving through that then, with getting stuff done, with getting, you know, your business to be profitable, with like, you know, showing up successfully?
Yeah, it's been a lot of blood, sweat, tears, lots of tears, a lot of tears, and a lot of, you know, genuine honesty about awareness, you know. So for me, the process of dismantling this stuff began in graduate school when I was studying clinical sexology and when I was focused on women and body image. And the layers of awareness around how my brain and body works and how I had been so subject for so long to these rules and stipulations that others held for me drove me crazy and made me angry. And then once I found myself in a leadership position with a team to manage, my first priority became centering well-being as a focus and saying, you know what, my job as a leader is to protect the mindset of the people that I need to perform. And my job as a coach is to understand and empower and create an atmosphere where everyone can flourish. And that means that I need to unmask myself, remove my ego, and show up as a feminine light, like straight up. And that was really scary. I didn't get, you know, direct pushback from folks. I did get, and I still do get, a lot of, you're so different, no one thinks like you know, that's not really business. And I'm like, well, I don't have a business background, but yet here I am, profitable as beep. And so it's kind of like, all right, you know, this is working, this is good, it works for me, it works for my team, it works for my org.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so you just allow yourself to, you're saying like tears, a lot of tears, like all things like that. You allow yourself to, like, what would be the process of that you would share with somebody else to allow them to be in their feminine and to rise?
Yeah. So I work from a coaching perspective because I'm a coach first. You know, JRNI coaching is coach training. And so, you know, step one, no matter what you're up against from a challenging perspective, is awareness. Awareness is the key to everything. So that internal compass, that internal feeling of, I don't like the way I feel right now, that somatic response. So soma is body. So that's your throat, that's your chest, that's the back of your neck, that's your belly, tightness in your belly where it just feels really gnarly. Your body tells you first that something is out of whack. And then your job is to examine, what is it that is really making me uncomfortable right now? And then from there, you replace that discomfort, the root of that discomfort, with what you'd like to think, feel, and experience instead. to start crafting a future vision that you can then work towards inhabiting with small action steps every day.
I love that so much. I'm so much about somatic body work, and that's what I do so much with all of, my clients and anyone I speak to and myself, is because for so long I was closed off to that part of me. I wasn't allowing
Yeah.
myself to feel, and everything gets trapped there. And, and this is why we put up, I put up a shell of the masculine and had such a struggle with that feminine essence within me, because I was so shut down to it.
Oh, yeah. I see this with clients all the time. And I really see it with the coaches that I train, especially women, when they're going through this struggle of how do I become visible? Am I good enough? Is my voice worthwhile? How do I put myself into the world with intention? How can I create ripples? And it's really scary.
Yeah. And how do we help them through that?
Well, I'd say, pep talks are really helpful. Pep talks, modeling vulnerability is something that I'm really big on. I tend to cry in every class that I train coaches in because I get overwhelmed with emotion. That's who I am. I don't hide it. I don't stuff it, and I own it. So I show emotion to my team and to my crew all the time. If someone else is experiencing emotion, I reach out and name it and say, you seem to be experiencing something right now. Is it okay to probe a little bit deeper? Is it something that you want to get out? And, a lot of times when I do Facebook Lives just for my organization, I don't wear makeup. And I show my house and I show myself and I show up in a completely stripped down, vulnerable way so that my people don't feel like they have to measure up to an unrealistic expectation.
I have deep respect for that, because I think vulnerability scares a lot of people. Like, when people see vulnerability in other people, it scares them. And, vulnerability is something that I think I've displayed in a lot of different areas, be it on this podcast in different episodes, or out, when you kind of out there and stuff happens, and it's just like there's such a need and such a want for people just to show up as who they are, because I want to see you as who you are. I want to feel you. I want to know that I'm not alone in what I feel, and I see you as well doing that, and so because that's something that I resonate with, that's something that I've displayed as well. And I've noticed how much it scares people and how much people kind of want to run or pretend that they can't see it. Why does that happen?
Oh, goodness. Well, I think that goes back to, I can trace it all the way back to the turn of the Industrial Revolution, actually. Yeah. So when we lived in cities and hamlets and farm-driven communities pre-industrial revolution, folks knew each other. And families could be identified by their characteristics. So-and-so has broad shoulders, he must be from this family. Oh, if you have that nose, you're definitely from this family over here. And people came to measure each other based on character, because your wealth status was basically set. You were born into whatever status you were born into. So character was incredibly important. When the Industrial Revolution happened, society really scattered to the winds, and people began inhabiting cities with strangers and going off to work in factories and fields with strangers. And there was no concrete measure of how do I evaluate this person who's walking towards me. There are no characteristics or signifiers that I can attach to. That's where consumer culture, designer goods, and the impact that we see from materialism happens today. So what happened during that period of time where folks learned, oh, if so-and-so is carrying a watch of that design, it must mean they have money. That's where the corsets came in. Women became, that very desirable to be small and easily overpowered. If you worked in the fields and you were tan and muscular, that said something about who you were. And so we began to fracture our identities. And what we see today with selfie culture or curated images on social media is the outcome of that beginning of a loss of character driven evaluation. People tried to show, this is what I have, in order to signify who I am. And there's so much pressure to show up.
There's so much pressure. And I'm noticing this, like, and specifically in like the younger generation now,
Yes.
like it's kind of hard to watch because there's such this strong comparison game, but they're comparing themselves to something that's not real. And I'm not sure that that's commuting in their mind, you know? What's your thoughts on social media and where it's going?
I mean, it's scary.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of different pieces to it. From, you know, dopamine fasting has been a huge buzzword recently. So let's peel that back and explain exactly what goes on. So a lot of the way that we engage with technology today has been developed from product market fit and profit driven perspective, but we're really just beginning to understand the psychological, emotional, and chemical impact that technology is having on our brains and bodies. What we do know, every anything that has a notification associated with it, whether it's a text message, an Instagram DM, a like, a Facebook post, Snapchat, you know, even an email, will give you a hit of dopamine that signifies, oh, there's some sort of social connection that has come in here. That's significant because when you engage with folks, even as we are on screen with each other and we can see each other's faces, in person especially, there is a combination of chemicals that also comes to the fore, including oxytocin, norepinephrine, and serotonin, which is the regulator. When you experience genuine in-person connection with someone, that serotonin regulator is what makes the experience feel content, that you leave feeling satisfied with your engagement. When you have these little hits of dopamine with notifications, it keeps you in a state of rapt anticipation where you're never fully satisfied with your engagement. You're waiting for the next hit. And I believe it's causing people to isolate further because they're feeling confused as to why they're not satisfied with the engagement, or they're posting a picture and they're not getting immediate gratification of likes. And so they start to feel bad about themselves. And so they retreat further. And what we know that does to your brain is it causes you to act like a diseased cow and isolate further from society as to not injure the rest of your herd.
Ooh. So really, this is such a topic that I'm in right now because I've noticed I've been traveling a lot, right? Like I've living in different places, working online. So I was noticing that although I'm like in awe of technology and how much it's been able, like we can talk like this right now across the world and it's formed connection, it's also deeply disconnected people and made people not be able to know how to communicate or express needs or be able to have conversations in person. And so I've come back to Australia and I'm now looking at community and being like, oh, like community and in-person human connection is something that I'm really passionate about bringing communities together to have that. And I think it comes because of all of the hormones that are that do become released when we're in person with people, and how different it feels to when you're with somebody to when they're liking a photo on Instagram or, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm noticing that a lot of people are feeling lonely, are feeling isolated, are feeling like they don't belong, yet also resistant to coming together in community.
Yes, absolutely. And I when I started researching this, I was shocked by what I found. So my impulse as a coach and a coach trainer who I build community all day for a living, you know, I thought that it was easy enough as saying, let's just forge more connection. Let's just, you know, get you out there into the world. Let's find some meetups for you. Let's find some people with common purpose for you to engage with. Because we have become so fractured as a society, and because people are retreating further, what they're experiencing is the evolutionary phenomenon of the feeling itself of isolation, which is a signal for you to get back with your tribe. If you don't do it because you're feeling bad about yourself, because you feel like you don't have any true friends, if you feel like you don't know how to engage, a couple of things happen. So as I mentioned, that your brain starts acting like a diseased cow, think about a herd of cattle. Somebody falls behind, and it's in the interest of the herd for that person to stay separate. So the human brain actually starts to think it's diseased and starts scanning social interaction for perceived threats. And so the way back in isn't to just, go to a party with strangers. It's actually to begin altruism training, vulnerability training, and focusing on relearning social cues like eye contact, shaking a hand, how to engage in everyday conversation. Those skills are being really lost and damaged.
Yeah. And are you seeing this specifically in a certain age group or a certain demographic of people specifically?
No, it's completely universal. And the test that I offer for it is, if you want to see how much of a safety blanket technology has become, walk into any space, whether it's 11-year-old kids who have cell phones to folks in a retirement home, and try to take their phones away.
Mm.
And see what happens. People cannot function without having the phone in case they need to duck and cover and get away from the social exchange.
Oh, that's fascinating, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Because so okay, how do we start to then not feel awkward in beginning this practice of eye contact, of engaging, of saying hi to somebody in a cafe and starting a conversation, like doing the,
Yeah.
because it's really common in, like, the dating scene as well. There's like online dating, and then, which I hate, if I'm honest, like it's such a struggle for me because you can't feel somebody, opposed to then getting a hit of them in person and actually being able to, commute, like actually feel their energy. It's such a different way of communicating. And so we're missing out on so much when we're just relying on social interactions online.
Oh, yeah. So, I think step one is to normalize. And, for anyone who's listening to us, to understand that it's not you, there's nothing wrong with you. This is a social construct that you've been caught up in, and you're not alone, and you're not weird or abnormal. This is normal stuff. This is your brain. It's not you. Step two would be to start with altruism. So, in order to control for a positive response when you begin to re-engage in society, the trick is to do something nice for someone else so that you get positive feedback, whether that's a compliment or holding the door or buying coffee for someone in line behind you, or donating a bunch of clothes, or showing up to volunteer someplace. You're going to get immediate positive social feedback, and your brain will start to relax and stop scanning your environments for threats. The more you can participate in vulnerability and altruism, the better chance you have reintegrating and gaining confidence.
Yeah, I love that advice so much.
Yeah.
So what about like the feeling of aloneness? Like this is, because there's a difference, I guess, between feeling lonely and feeling aloneness. And how is this showing up in what you're understanding or in your work?
Yeah. So aloneness and the feeling of aloneness has a lot to do with what I described earlier, tracing back to the Industrial Revolution of the shoulds, right? I should have a certain level of education. I should have a certain kind of car. I should have a certain size waist. I should have, 2.5 kids in the white picket fence. Folks measure themselves against these norms, and that's where they begin to feel a self breakdown. And kind of sitting with it and spinning with it is what will push you further and further and further, into aloneness from a perspective of a lack of worthiness. A way to combat that is to start living from the inside out versus the outside in. So one of the tools that we use in coach training is the VIA character strengths assessment, which is a really gorgeous applied positive psychology assessment that will give someone their top 5 character strengths. Character strengths represent the full capacity of humans to be good, essentially. So when you have a client who's gained their top 5 character strengths, and you can begin to lean into those and design your life around who you authentically are, you start to anchor to deep-seated contentment and authenticity. And that's where clients can join with themselves in aloneness.
And so it's about understanding yourself on a deeper level.
Yeah, understanding yourself on a deeper level in terms of what makes you tick, what brings you joy, what capacity do you have to promote goodness for yourself and others. How it's like, so in therapy land, in the medical model, therapists look at something called the DSM in order to diagnose, illness or disease. In the coaching model, we look at the VIA to assess strengths and to assess goodness and to assess virtue, and then lean into that in order to get someone on a trajectory to flourishing.
Okay. And so the more that they lean into like those traits, is that just give you more of this like a confidence kind of feeling of them living that, or what does it do?
It's more of a lifestyle design that puts you on track for authentic fulfillment. So I'll give you an example. My top 2 character strengths are my capacity to love and be loved, and humor. So me as a human, if I'm not in an environment where I can love people and receive love, I'm going to shrivel and die. Same thing with humor. If I can't laugh, if I can't joke, I'm going to feel terrible. And so to know that about myself is to say, okay, what do I need more of or less of in my life in order to experience those character traits on a level that really fulfills me?
Okay, I love that, because this has now sparked something in circling back to like the masculine, feminine world, not male, female, but the energies, is something that I hear a lot of is that, but I'm in my job, or I need to do this thing. And so that my self-exploration or the discovery of what I actually need is secondary, because I've got shit to do, essentially. I've got these things, the to-do list, I've got to take care of all the people, I've got to go to work. And so the thing that I actually need, that I know is off in my body, that's sending me my life spiraling, is going to take a backseat. And it's maybe because we're caught up in that go, go, go world, but that's a huge disconnect. And that reminded me of what, when you were just saying that, then is like, when you lean into these things that you know that you need to flourish, then like, we're not doing that really.
No, we're not doing that. And the go, go, go that you described, that's living from the outside in. That's the hedonic treadmill. The hedonic treadmill is another really crazy phenomenon that when you achieve material gain, the satisfaction only lasts 3 to 4 months before you need something more. Period. End of story. Doesn't matter how great it is. And then when you lean in on the converse, living from the inside out, I like to think about it in terms of the conditions that you as a unique human plant need to survive. You need sunlight, you need water. Those are non-negotiables. You might need humidity, you might need dryness. So you are a unique little ecosystem, and you need to feed yourself with sunlight and water. And whether that's love or humor, or your, any of the other strengths, wisdom, knowledge, temperance, transcendence, appreciation of beauty and excellence is a really good one. So folks with that as a top character strength, if they don't make time to see art and music or walk around in nature and get their fix for beauty and excellence, they're going to feel terrible.
It's becoming such a necessity now, right? Of realizing how important it is to make time for these things, despite your to-do list or despite what's going on. And would you say that it actually would help and make you work more efficiently, or make your life more productive and beautiful if you were to make space for this stuff?
Oh yes, the direct outcome is an energetic shift.
Yeah.
a complete energetic shift with, you know, the output of falling in love with your existence.
Yeah. Do you think that there is like, you know, people that come in to do coaching, right? Like come in to be a client of coaching, that there is this resistance because then they are realizing that so much of their life might have to change?
That happens in coach training too. It happens on
Yeah.
both sides. You know, you can't interact with this science without having massive shifts, massive ahas, massive, oh my God, I now see the world completely differently. I have to change.
Mm.
And I don't think it's resistance so much as overwhelm that comes in, and folks are like, oh God, I really have to change my whole, you know, being. And the answer is, yeah, you do.
Yeah, and it can feel overwhelming, but what do you suggest for somebody? Because, you know, I think because I've walked through the door many times and you know what's on the other side of doing the awkward thing or the uncomfortable thing or making the change, you're like, oh, like almost like, why didn't I do this sooner? Like it's so beautiful on this side. But there is like, you're constantly moving and edging your way through uncomfortable territory and so much of the unknown. But what advice do you have, or what would you say to somebody who is like at the door that's wanting to go through but is like holding back because of that uncertainty?
It's normal. It's natural. It's absolutely part of life, and it is mirrored in nature. So a blade of grass, before it bursts out of the ground in green color, the seed actually spontaneously combusts and completely disrupts. Same thing with a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. Do you think that caterpillar understands why it's compulsively building the cocoon and then all of a sudden its body turns to goo and it completely, you know, self-destructs and emerges? And then same thing with muscles. Human muscles have to tear, and the scar tissue is what builds us. So the discomfort is valid,
Mm-hmm.
and the discomfort that you're experiencing is normal. It's mirrored in nature, and so you can trust the process of growth.
Oh, that's the best explanation I've heard for that. So good. Yeah, I love that. And I wanted to bring up again around the concept of technology nowadays. Is this different for men and women? Like, does gender come into this?
So, you know, gender, I see as a construct. It's something that we're socialized to believe about ourselves and our bodies, and so it is a choice, you know, in many ways for many people, and it's not in many ways for many people. Um, so much of our world is gendered, and technology is no different. So when I was doing the research to speak with you, it was striking to me that technology is associated almost entirely with masculine energy and with masculine gender, that it is considered a tool, a machine. So just in the way that young boys are socialized to become good at, you know, building machinery, mastering machines, owning things, it's the same with technology, which, oh, by the way, is a 90% male field. So it is literally men who have developed technology, and you can't separate that fact from the experience of its use. Even looking at video games, which is predominantly played by men and boys, in terms of ownership and control. And then women are socialized to maintain relationships, home life, and be creative. And that is much of the way that they interact with technology instead of mastery and ownership.
So, as an example that we would see of that is that, you know, the woman is perhaps posting the photos of the family or posting a selfie, whereas the man is behind the scenes, or like would you describe that?
I think that's really nuanced, and I couldn't say 100% yes or 100% no, but I think that there are definitely behavioral norms and patterns that we can identify where a woman might be more inclined to really curate, you
Mm-hmm.
know, an existence and put herself in the position of subject, because that is how she is socialized to understand her existence in terms of a male gaze, in terms of viewership.
Yeah.
And if I curate my image in this way, I can then become it. And a man is more likely to engage with technology as a consumer, as a viewer, as someone who is, promoting or in power or in control.
Yeah. What do you see then from your research of building a healthy relationship with technology?
Understanding the role of dopamine is absolutely critical. To understanding how your emotional response system is structured towards these things. The reason that people feel bad when they show themselves on technology is directly tied to the response that they get, and it can become incredibly addicting. Second, I would say understand, the nature of dissociation that technology causes from community and in real contact with real humans. Try to go to a coffee house without your phone or computer. Folks don't know what to do with themselves. They're literally flopping around. So face it, face that discomfort, understand that humans are becoming an indoor species, which is terrifying. REI put out a landmark study on this. And then, pull it back and say, what do you really want? If this is the way you feel, let's draw awareness to it. Let's give ourselves a break. Let's know that we're just part of these larger structures that are really weird. We're living in a really weird time. What do we want to experience instead? And get into that future vision and positivity.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. And I even feel it with, like, I don't have my phone on loud ever. Like, it's always on silent. And because I feel that, like, I hate when I know there's notifications always there and it's going off. And if I'm around somebody that's got their phone on loud, like, it starts to agitate me. Like, I'm noticing how much I need to put my phone on airplane mode for a while and, like, and have those moments because of the anxiety that can creep in when your phone's just, when you constantly feel like you need it or, like, have a responsibility.
Oh yeah. I mean, it goes in two directions. Number one, it's currency. So folks are coming to understand their own personal currency in terms of the affirmation they get from technology. And it also really messes with your brain chemistry. So in order to do really critical, deep thinking and really form new ideas from a conscious perspective, your brain needs to experience boredom. And because of the accessibility of constant diversion, we're not allowing our brains to ever get to the point of boredom.
Whoa, that's massive, isn't it?
Yes.
Wow, you're just like this this field of knowledge. I just want to keep going. I'm like, what else do you have for me? What else do you know?
I mean, this is what I do. This is what I teach. This is my life, my whole mission is to put this into the world and to arm coaches with it so that, it's not just me. So that it's hundreds and thousands of people out there with this knowledge base saying, let's change society.
Yeah. What do you, if you could pick one thing, like, what would you say would be the most impactful thing we could do to make a change in society right now?
Oh, other people matter and center emotional well-being.
And explain that.
So, knowing that we live in these siloed worlds where it's easy to swipe left or right, or it's easy to tear someone down on social media, or it's easy for a manager to say, if you don't want to be here, get out. We're faced with such cruelty without consequence because of the walls that technology and the gig economy, frankly, are driving us to. And what that's doing is keeping everyone's nervous system on overdrive, and it's keeping entire generations in fight or flight. And that causes cardiovascular damage to our hearts. So literally, if you induce positive emotions, if you center well-being, if you focus on kindness, if you focus on building people up, if you focus on investing in humans instead of money, we can repair the cardiovascular damage from all of this stress. and we can begin to build new ways of being.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And also, what is your research shown in even just, women tearing other women down, or, this man against woman approach? Like, there's so much againstness, if that's a word, that I see, that I experience, that I feel, that I hate witnessing, that I'm doing my best to bring people together so that we don't have to experience that all the time, that it doesn't have to be that way. So what's your reason?
I would go directly to the science of self-compassion for that. And Kristen Neff is the theorist that I turn to. She's awesome. And her work centers anchoring yourself in common humanity. That when you're experiencing psychological anguish, anger, pain, frustration, sadness, grief, you are joining with all of humanity in a common experience. And so we can find compassion for ourselves in those moments. And then we can also find compassion for our fellow humans in knowing that this is universal. It's universal to experience these kinds of emotions and start to take the walls down and take the againstness down.
Yeah. And do you think that's just what it is? That people are still maybe afraid of admitting that this is what they're feeling, or that, there is what is the thing that goes up that creates that againstness?
I don't know. And it's something that puzzles me, very much, but I do think it does almost go back to, the turning of the Industrial Revolution, of people really striving out in society away from their communities to build things that are just so individual versus communal.
Yeah.
So I would say, it's this idea that if I don't protect myself or what is mine, with everything that I have, then I will somehow be less than or taken away from.
Yeah, that makes sense, because then there's this big drive for competitiveness, like if that person does more than me in that arena, then I'll be left behind, or I won't matter. And so then it fuels this individuality / competitiveness, I guess, which makes sense if it's coming from that. So we're literally dealing right now in our nervous system with so much stuff from generations ago, and it's up to us to heal the patterns, isn't it?
It is. And I think that, while this is a very difficult time to exist in, I think this is also a really incredible time to exist in, because we're having this conversation from opposite sides of the world, and both of us really care, and we're not the only ones.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there is a lot of opportunity to exist right now in this time. And yeah, you're right. It's both scary but also exciting to see what's possible.
Yeah. And I think, in terms of searching for community, find your people. Find the people who want to have these conversations, who want to support you in your growth, who want to, build with you, grow with you, and they're out there. That's why we built our organization, was to provide a safe space for coaches to come be vulnerable, imperfect humans as we strike out as beacons of hope.
Yeah, I love that. This has been a nourishing conversation. Like, I feel more in my body talking to you. So
me too.
Yeah.
I'm so glad.
I want to circle it back to leadership in the feminine essence, and because I feel like there's never enough advice and knowledge and wisdom to be shared on this, and I'm so passionate about it. And I do believe within us we have both masculine and feminine that are so needed to exist together harmoniously. But there is such a suppression of the feminine in women who want to be out there that want to step up, that want to be a leader, that want to show up fully, that want to exist as their full self in relationship, that want to do these things, and there's such a caged woman in there. What do you say on that?
Role models. Look for those who have come before you. Look for the people who you look at and say, I wish I could be that person. That person inspires me. For me, it's Brene Brown, straight up. And just when you look towards a role model, it makes the path a lot less scarier because someone has provided you with a roadmap. And you know that you're not alone, you're not the only one, and there is at least a Northern Star on how to do this stuff. And then, the second part is building community, not going it alone, of talking to other women like we are today about this stuff and getting validation and support to rise up, with feminine energy in a peaceful way and lead anyway.
Yeah, and that's beautiful. That's like the thing that I guess has helped me on this journey is the letting go of the facade of me needing to do it alone, like this lone wolf mentality that I had. And as I've started to hang that hat up, like it's so much more easier and effortlessly able to happen when you can reach out and someone's holding your hand.
Oh yeah. And even just being seen, just being seen and validated that, you're not crazy. You're not experiencing this in a silo. This is real. And what you're thinking and feeling is 100% valid.
Yeah. And it turns into so much beauty when you're able to be met in that space. And that's where I think the power of what I'm finding with women's work and why I have gone into this field as well. Because I work with men one-on-one, and like there's such this pressure for usually a man in relationship to be all the things that his woman wants him to be. And yet what then I'm noticing the woman, and I've been in this situation myself, is like the woman wants to be met, and we can find different relationships and different forms of places and people to meet those things. It doesn't have to be all pegged on this one person. And so that's where I'm like wanting to bring women community together, because I'm noticing that we're so nourished and so met in ways that then flourishes in our intimate relationships and in our work life and stuff, because we're not having those voids,
Oh yeah. And I think it's really important to, recognize and hold our men in loving light. That's an incredible amount of pressure that has been foisted generation after generation on men and boys to have to be the be all end all, to have to provide, to have to show up, to have to perform. That's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. When I was coming up as a leader, I found myself scared to step into decision making, because for me that was a masculine trait that I didn't really have to embody. And then once I really stepped into it and I got the hang of it, it's gnarly. It's not fun to be the one in charge or the one who's responsible or the one who's making decisions. And I said to my husband, is this the way that you feel? Is this the way that you felt? And he said, yeah, it's really sucks. And I was like, I'm sorry, like, God.
Yeah. And I think it's so, like, it inspires me every day thinking that they just do that, like, and I have a beautiful best friend who we speak about this stuff all the time. And we were having a conversation one time, and he's like, I just feel like I'm looked as like this concrete block that just doesn't feel things, and I just keep going and like taking the lead, calling the shots, like and he's like, and I do it because I want to provide and I want to protect and I want to do it, and he's doing it from such a good place. He's like, but man, I'd love to be appreciated for it. Like, and that's all they need. And I've had many conversations now with men on the podcast saying like all men need is some appreciation. But far out, like what they do, like the willingness that I see in them of people that just continue just to show up day in, day out, like it's inspiring. And so, yeah, they deserve the appreciation.
Oh yeah. And for me, I think the path forward is to embolden and empower women to rise up alongside of our, our masculine men, our masculine energy, so that we can share the burden.
Yeah.
because everyone's capable,
Yeah.
and it's not fair to anyone to be in these boxes.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, what a conversation. Where can people go then to find out more about what you're doing and your work and just like
Yeah, thank you. My company is called JRNI. It's spelled JRNI because the band Don't Stop Believing has all the trademarks cornered on that one. But so JRNI is JRNI, and we're at journey.co, C-O. And if you go to journey.co/podcast, you'll see a great discount on my training program. You'll find out more about what it's like to become a coach. And I can absolutely send that along to you to publish for your listeners. It's journey.co/podcast.
awesome. And I'd love to share that in the show notes so people can access that easily. But thank you so much again for sharing what you have today. I do really want to honor you for your depth and knowledge and your big heart and the energy that I feel like beaming through the screen of how much you are just like living and walking and breathing this because of your heart and your kindness and the love that you have for the world. It just shines through. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing.
No, you're going to make me cry. Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And thank you for holding this space for these conversations. You know, this is such vital work, and thank you.
Yeah. And if there was one last message or thing on your heart that you would like to share today around what we've spoken about so far, what would be the last message?
You're not alone. You're never alone. And there's a big difference between feelings and facts. So even though you may feel not so great, look to the facts of your life and then find your people.
Find your people. I love it. Thanks, Noelle.
You're super welcome.